Welcome to Are You Local, a podcast about identity, self, and finding one's place away from home. My name is George. I'm an American-born Filipino who has been based in Singapore for 9 years. Throughout my life, I've lived in different places like California, Okinawa, and Manila. I created this podcast to help me uncover the meaning behind local. This episode was recorded in October 2020 with Ulrike Klemm, a German national based in Hong Kong. I've had many favorite memories with Eureka. I'll tell you this, it involved wine, a lot of wet gay men with water guns, and
Yes.
one time when I was single, she painted my face with makeup, gave me fierce eyeliner, and we headed to a club here in Singapore called Peaches. It's since closed down. Remember that when we went to Peaches?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It was beautiful. Yeah.
Rika and I were introduced by a common friend who I hope to interview for this podcast at a later date. Ulrike moved to Singapore a couple years back, and being enthusiastic as I am about Singapore, I was more than happy to tour her around. The thing is, she's not in Singapore anymore. She has since moved to Hong Kong.
It was an offer by my company. And I thought, two major cities in Asia in 2 years? Why would I say no? So, whilst I didn't want to leave, wasn't ready to leave Singapore. I had planned to stay longer. And that opportunity was just too good not to take.
So you're originally from Germany, but you've worked in many global cities. I know you lived and worked in London, you went to Singapore, now you're in Hong Kong. I mean, which of these cities do you find the most exciting?
You forgot Berlin. It's an
Oh, Berlin, yeah, of
international
course. I mean, outside Germany, Berlin, of course.
But that's a Berliner response. We always make sure we're on the list. I think we're not belonging on the list, but we at least we have the arrogance to think we're on the list. Every city has their own charm and their own beauty, and it is depending in terms of where you are. So I, for instance, loved London, but I was early 30s when I moved. It was my big desire. I was so excited to go there, and I loved London in general from a vibe perspective, from a career opportunity perspective. I love to be in a different cultural setup and in such a multicultural setup as London is. I love the modernity about that and everything around that as well. But then I got tired of London, and because all grow and we all change as well.
How many years were you in London?
It's almost 8 years. Almost 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And there was a time when I didn't think I would ever leave, or I would ever go back to Berlin, or I could see myself there as well. So I felt myself grounded there. I knew that I wanted to live in different places.
Was Singapore on that list? Or was it just
No,
suddenly appeared in front of you?
no, you know what? Asia wasn't on the list. Bless me. So when I lived in London, I always looked west. I always thought, okay, the US, I want to go to the US because from a career perspective, but that was would be really career driven because of what I do. Most companies are headquartered in the US, so I thought that would be good. And I do like big cities. I would love to live in New York, San Francisco, Chicago. Maybe not. Yeah. So that's what I looked for. And then I was in conversation with a company to go to the US, but it didn't really come through, and which was a good decision because I got a new position within the organization. And then actually I moved back to Berlin after that almost 8 years because I just felt like I needed a homestead. And after 3 years in Berlin, I felt the itchy feet again, and I was thinking, what next? And when I started to do a bit of a review where I could go next, it was for me Asia. And then I decided between Hong Kong and Singapore. I decided for Singapore.
It's great that since you moved to Asia, that you're able to see and experience Hong Kong and Singapore. These are two cities that are always constantly compared to each other within
Yeah.
this region, this part of the world. They're both developed. They're both, well, I'd say Singapore's a bit more culturally diverse, but there is like a super majority from both countries. And how has it been like for you integrating into Hong Kong?
Um, Interesting and not easy actually. but that's for a couple of reasons as well. It reminded me a lot on my integration experience in London. So there is a lot of familiarities between Hong Kong and London, and then sometimes I feel like, and I hope no one is offended by this one, but there is a lot of London vibes in Hong Kong. Of course, in with the Hong Kong Chinese Asian approach to it, but it has a lot of parallel things.
Yeah, what is that London vibe though?
It's like in terms of when you compare to Singapore, I know people are very open and very communal, whilst here in Hong Kong, it's a little bit more like cliche and it's not like so inviting. And that's for a couple of reasons, and it's all good, right? So that's you have that. You have a very good party scene and a very good restaurant scene, different to in Singapore, which is very London as well. So you can compare that. And then the art scene is great here. Not comparable with London, but still very good. And then the fashion, I'm just loving the fashions. It's just like very dangerous here. So it's very similar to London. So
Fashion is dangerous? Did I hear that correctly?
yeah, because it's you could buy all the time, right? And you have the latest trends, and then you have here also the Asian designers, and the Asian twist rate, which is wonderful. So yeah, yeah, that's the parallels with London, which I see in terms of how people interact, how people entertain and
Hmm.
spend their time, and where they're focusing on.
Yeah, I just realized that you moved to Hong Kong in 2020 where there were, the height of the political protests and then a pandemic. Like, oh my gosh, like, you have any funny stories to tell? Any lighthearted moments you've encountered?
How funny do you want to go? Um, I have a funny story. Yes, I'm as usual when you go. I'm part of a Facebook group which is expats in Hong Kong. Right, we all
Let's explain that first to people listening. Eureka was part of a very interesting Facebook group while she was in Singapore. And what's the name of it? It has a funny name. There's even a version 2 or something.
the real Singapore expats housewives point 2.0 classified, something like that. Yeah, yeah. But it was a good group, right?
It's a
Yeah,
good group, and definitely you can network with people and share
yeah.
everything. I don't know. What do you share there? Furniture, share
Furniture,
advice.
yeah, know where to go, where to the dentist, where you can get your flowers, where whatever you want to post there. There's always someone with an opinion, so that's good.
So you
So
found one in Hong Kong.
yeah, I found one in Hong Kong, and it's just good to read in order to. And that was beginning of COVID, and there was I think Italian digital nomad, and he posted in that Facebook, and that was when just COVID started and everyone was starting to mask up. And he was in Thailand, and he said, "Oh, he's planning to come back. He's planning to come to Hong Kong, and with this virus, will he get um, weird looks if he's not wearing a mask?" And then everyone in the group is saying, "Mate, the majority of people wearing masks, people who went through SARS and all of this one are wearing masks. We recommend you wearing a mask because that's what the majority of the people do. But if you don't, yes, people will think you're not behaving reasonably." And he started to argue about his freedom and that he doesn't want it. And we're like, you come here to ask for an opinion and for an advice. Don't challenge us. We're telling you how it is. Just, it was just hilarious. I thought that was a funny thing to look into. Funny is as well. I came to Hong Kong and I always lived in like big urban cities and I really enjoyed that. But because of the pandemic and because of the restrictions we had, I'm a really big on hiking now, which is something you can do in Hong Kong. And I find that hilarious because when I asked people before I moved, what's the great thing in Hong Kong, there's all said hiking. And I was like, this is weird. It's a 7 million people place with all the things and people are going hiking. Here we go. 6 months later, I'm hiking. So that's funny. I find that's something to help you.
I'm trying to think more also on communication. Like, I mean, in Singapore, since they have so many languages in Singapore, I feel like in Hong Kong, it's English, it's Cantonese, and
Hmm.
then. But have you ever had any trouble explaining to a taxi driver, or
Oh
no?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, but they're choosing. They don't want to. Taxi drivers here are.
Huh?
I'm glad for Uber. Taxi drivers don't want to they don't want to understand you. They don't want to take you the direct road. It's difficult to communicate with taxi drivers, I find
I
here.
think these are those red taxis, right? Or how
Yes,
does it look like in
yeah,
Hong Kong?
and they're suicidal. The way they drive.
Oh
I'm so
God.
yeah. Uber. I'm a Uber promoter. So yeah, that's difficult.
Oh,
Sometimes when you go to places, more remote places, I had to learn that the menu is in Cantonese, and you think they don't speak English, but actually they do speak English. They will bring out an English menu when they see you. When the Gailo, we call Gailos here. When the Gailo comes, they give you an English menu. So you need to overcome that. I first thought that is a sign that they don't serve in English, but actually they do. So
this is a question I'm gonna be asking folks on this podcast. Is that the definition of local? If you've lived in a country for long enough, can you be considered a local, or will you always be, you know, not local?
um
Like, what's your thought on
yeah,
that?
yeah. And I know you had asked me this question before, and I was thinking about that as well. You know what? I don't want to be a local actually. I'm good
Oh,
not to be a local. And in Asia it's very obvious that I'm not a local because I'm a white Western, right? Um so and I was thinking, why do I think this way? So when I started learning English and when I did my yeah, I did a semester in England with Erasmus during my studies, and I was really working hard on my English and getting especially rid of my German accent. And he was a Spanish English teacher with the thickest accent you could ever think. But he lived in the UK for 10 years or whatever. And he actually said, you know, your language is your heritage and it's your culture and it's your identity as well. So they tried in the previous years, like in the 20s and 30s, to really assimilate and get rid of the accent. And then what they notice with people who learn a different language is that they are losing their identity as well. So it's actually even more important that you keep that as well, because otherwise you're feeling in between. You don't feel white and you don't feel dead, right? So that was really important for me to. I embraced that and said, okay, actually, you know what? I will never be English. When I lived abroad for the very first time, I started to understand myself, my culture, my heritage much better. I had to leave Germany in order to become German, which is a bit funny, and I guess it's a result of being German and the history there as well. But I embraced my Germanness um, being abroad, but that also meant that I brought in other cultures as well. So for me, it then also created an authenticity in terms of who I am and what my upbringing and my values are. And hence, I don't feel like that I don't, hence, I have to be the locals in order to fit into the locals. It's like something, I think that's the difference between integration and assimilation. I think I'm a believer in integrating, but not assimilating because I will never be a Hong Konger, right? And that's okay. And I don't want that either. Not no disrespect. I didn't want to be a Singaporean, and maybe there was a time I wanted to be a Londoner. Yes, there was a time, but London, that cultural identity is very mixed anyway, isn't it? So yeah, that's what it is, right? And then yeah, and then throughout my living in different locations, it just helped me to find myself more and be comfortable with the differences and embracing the differences, but also choosing what you want, right? So I'm, I dislike the local thing because it does then it's coming with a certain requirement and pattern, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And I guess that was my motivation to leave Germany in the first place as well. And I guess, again, that's why I'm actually don't want to be local. I'm quite happy to be transient. right? And stay as much as I like.
And
Yeah.
visiting. And I love what you said that it's when you left Germany that you feel like you've discovered or rediscovered your identity more as a German. What would your advice be, Ulrika, for someone who just moved to Hong Kong? I mean, if I were to move to Hong Kong, if your best friend from Germany moves to Hong Kong, what advice would you give to them?
It doesn't really matter where you go, right? I think set your priorities while you're going. And I had different priorities with every move. And with my latest one, it was about building a home for myself as a base and a foundation. And then you can start from there. So it's like, but when I moved to London, for instance, I moved into a flat share because I wanted more the interactions and the connectivity as well. Like, go there with intention and then build your living there with the intention. It's easy to meet people because you have different ways to meet. Don't be afraid of that. But get yourself in a way where you are comfortable and where you're not challenging yourself all the time, because there will be things which will challenge us, which you don't understand. You will feel lost. You will feel like, I don't understand. No one understands me. Why are they doing this? This is stupid, and all of this. When you have those situations, so you need to find somewhere where you can ground and feel safe and feel okay to be you. I think that's would be my advice, and that's not for Hong Kong. That's for every move, right? Yeah.
Yes, and the example is joining the Singapore what 2.0. You
I
finding
didn't
a
finding a network. I only bought from them from the phone. I didn't actually meet. But actually, the ladies I met, they were really really nice.
they're
But it
lovely,
didn't.
yeah.
They're lovely, but it didn't become like friendships. You know, my friendships were more like those via social networks and all of that. Friends inviting, introducing friends.
Marika, thanks for sharing your story today to our listeners as I start this podcast. Do you have any final thoughts, messages to anyone listening?
Actually, it's really, really interesting. I had a conversation with a member of my team today, and he actually approached me and said, and I could just feel. He said, okay, he's getting comfortable here, and what about next, and all of that one. And he was talking about going to Singapore, and I could just see the excitement and the fear in his eyes as well. And I just said to him, you know what? You got itchy feet, you gotta go. So if you got itchy feet and if it excites you and scares you, do it. That's the right thing to do.
To everyone listening, I appreciate if you subscribe and follow this podcast because I'm going to be speaking to a few more folks who are from different parts of the world. I have a Filipino who's based in Bangkok, a Filipino who's based in Antwerp. Is it Antwerp? Did I pronounce it correctly? Antwerp?
Antwerp,
Antwerp.
Antwerp. Yeah,
Antwerp.
yeah,
Antwerp.
yeah,
Right. We'll
yeah.
also have folks who moved to New York. So thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.